Awesome. We're live with Zach Williams, founder and CEO of PYM. It's awesome to have you here today, Zach.
Thank you so much for having me, John. It's a pleasure to be on.
Yeah, so for those out there who don't know what PYM is, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're building?
Sure. Well, I created the company PIM because I was dealing with a really challenging time after my father, who was the entertainer Robin Williams, died by suicide. And I was diagnosed with post traumatic stress disorder and generalized anxiety disorder and depression. And through that experience, I started self medicating pretty consistently using alcohol and was feeling terrible and really needed a change in my lifestyle. And as part of that, I discovered a couple things. One is a commitment to mental health advocacy was very healing for the underlying trauma relating to my dad's passing. The second thing was when I took using alcohol to manage my anxiety and depression and trauma
Mm.
out of the equation, I was really stressed and anxious, was less depressed, but found myself needing something else. And I discovered through the introduction from my wife the amino acid formulations that help manage neurotransmitter health.
Mm.
And I started exploring them and researching them, and they essentially changed my life. And so, as part of that, I realized there was an opportunity to align what I was doing in the nonprofit space, focused around mental health advocacy, and what I want to be doing in the private sector, which is focus more on mental health oriented products and services. And I created a brand that I wanted to stand for mental health, like Starbucks stands for coffee or Red Bull stands for energy, that creates healthy, effective, natural products to benefit people's mental health. And so we launched last year in September and have been supporting tens of thousands of people at this point, and it's been really exciting. It's, of course, challenging operating a company during a pandemic, but had the great fortune of working with an incredible team that enables us to provide products where the support is needed.
Amazing. Amazing. Yeah, I can definitely relate to that, story. Not all of it, of course, but parts of, trying different things to self-regulate and doing some things that maybe numb you a little bit more, don't make you feel as good the next day, versus maybe discovering modalities or forms of therapy that are a little bit more sustainable. Um, I'm curious to dive a little bit deep into what exactly is in PIM, and maybe before we get into the formulation that you have today, maybe what it took to get there. So you're dealing with these different uh, stresses and struggles and anxieties and trauma, and you're trying these different things, and then your wife introduces some of these compounds that support neurotransmitter or health. I might not be saying that right.
You're
What
you're
it
you're saying
Yeah,
it right.
what
It's
yeah,
supporting neurotransmitter
yeah.
health.
Okay. What did you try first? And what then got you to landing on the formulation that you have in the product today?
Well, we from the onset we realized that gamma aminobutyric acid was really helpful for me personally, and
Mm.
it was also helpful for my wife, Olivia June, mainly in terms of managing stress and anxiety. And so we started with GABA, and then through our discovery process, meaning the product testing process, we layered in other supportive compounds like L-theanine, which goes great with GABA. And we started experimenting with adaptogens like ashwagandha, rhodiola, lemon balm, and we found that rhodiola was most supportive for the most people. So, you know, the thing for us was, how do we layer in these products together to create a, a product that, or layer in these compounds together to create a product that's helpful for the most amount of people?
Mm.
Because when it comes to supporting neurotransmitter health, people are different. There's not one size fits all. So we really
Yeah.
wanted to formulate something that was helpful for as many people as possible. And then now what we're focused on is expanding our offerings so that we can continue to provide additional support for people who find our product, say, not as helpful as, say, other supportive compounds, whether it's tyrosine or tryptophan or 5-HTP or essential nutrients, some circumstances methylated B vitamins, methylated folate, things like that. So,
Mm.
um, so we started the experimentation process working with a food scientist
Mm.
who was brilliant. Her name's Lena Kwok, and in collaborating with her, we landed on several different approaches and had to really winnow down what we ended up with based
Mm.
upon exploring, do we do a pill versus a chewable? And we landed on a chewable gummy because it enabled our product to be best absorbed into,
Mm.
a customer system. And so, the process for us took about 9 months of experimentation, because we didn't want to just say, hey, we're gonna throw these compounds in, and they work for some people, and there's research there, but we can stop at that and just go for it. We actually wanted to take more of a measured approach in ensuring that people were getting the right support and that was effective for the most people. And we ended up corroborating that with a pre-trial study that we did, ultimately using the double-blind randomized approach, and it turns out it was helpful for the supermajority of people who were taking the product and had anxiety and stress. So um,
Mm.
that was good to know.
Yeah. Yeah, I've tried some of those different compounds too, and they've been. I've never really known, like, is it just placebo, or is it actually working? But there's more and more research that shows that these plants um, actually do something in terms of helping the body deal with and modulate stress. And I think they're
Yeah.
really cool because, like, you can have them in the morning or you can have them at night, and or I think there's different ones, but they kind of help your body adapt. They don't necessarily always, like, in the morning they might give you energy, whereas night they can actually help you relax and calm down, which I think is kind of interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that is an element of it. You mentioned the placebo effect, which is interesting to see as well, because you have a placebo effect with mood stabilizers, with SSRIs. They just, if people take something, they have an effect. Yeah, if people take something with the expectation of a desired effect, it's just shown to have a desired
Yeah.
effect. That said, through our testing and study, we surpassed what you would find with a placebo pretty significantly. So,
Amazing.
the main thing from our end is, hey, even if our product is helpful, it's really only a part of the equation. We want to get people into a mental health hygiene ritual, meaning nutrition, fitness, mindfulness, meditation, engage in a series of experiences and products that ultimately enable them to feel balanced and grounded throughout the day. So, that's our primary goal, is to catalyze healthy mental health hygiene oriented activity.
Yeah, yeah. This is just like one tool in an overall overarching regimen that you guys are recommending or believe in. I'm curious, like maybe double clicking for another minute just on the product itself. Is this something that you could have that you could take in conjunction with a mood stabilizer? And how did you think about PIM being a more preventative care product for mental wellness versus maybe some of the more clinical approaches to remedying stress and anxiety?
Sure, and that's an excellent question, and we, with our company, are not seeking to replace people who are relying upon, behavior relating to people who need and require mood stabilizers and things like that. I will cite some emerging research that a balanced diet and a focus around supplementation can actually improve uh, outcomes with things like mood stabilizers.
Mm,
Um, so I don't have the exact research on hand, but it's shown that if you take care of yourself and manage your neurotransmitter deficiencies, then there's an additional benefit to be had than just, say, taking a mood stabilizer on its own. That said, there needs to be more research specifically focusing around adjunct experiences, meaning taking a pharmaceutical and supplementing it with therapy or nutrition or fitness regimens. We that additional data around how experiences work together is extremely valuable because it shows that you can actually engage in lifestyle interventions in addition to, you know, clinical interventions to create basically a stacked effect, right? And so
totally.
that's really what we want to advocate for in that space. That said, I will say we are seeking to replace unhealthy behaviors relating to self-medicating, like people who abuse alcohol, who are trying to manage their mental health. We want to provide safer alternatives. I found a safer alternative for myself. You know, Often now people are getting overprescribed medication, whether it comes to, say, benzodiazepam,
Yeah.
Xanax, Valium, things like that. Xanax, Valium, etc. is helpful for many, many people. There are also people who end up taking it, become over reliant upon it, and then need to taper off of it. And in some circumstances, just stopping taking these benzos can cause enormously harmful health effects, right? And so,
Yeah.
you know, from our end, we just want to help facilitate more healthy behavior relating to managing mental health. So it's not like we aren't for pharmaceuticals. It's not has nothing to do with that. It's mainly about, hey, if you're experiencing neurotransmitter deficiencies, whether it's GABA or dopamine or serotonin or epinephrine or norepinephrine or endorphins, there are things you can do to manage that. And then from there, evaluate what it is you might need. Do you need to manage the trauma? Do you need to manage other elements? Are you still depressed? What is it that you need from there? We want to create a foundational approach and then frame to a potential customer or someone in need. Hey, you're balanced. You have a foundation based upon managing these deficiencies. Now, how are you feeling? Where do you want to go from
Mm,
here? Do you need mood stabilizers? Do you need therapeutic support? Do you want to do CBT? All these different things. So, from us,
mm.
it's just about finding a balanced approach. It's really not take this over that, save for circumstances where you're actually seriously impacting someone's health, right?
Mm.
Then we want to say, hey, can we provide an opportunity around learning about other compounds and experiences that might be healthier ways of managing X, Y, and Z?
Last question, sort of on the formula and the product, and maybe just on these compounds in general. Are there things to be wary of when it comes to these products? Meaning, also like, can you take too much GABA? Can you take too much L-theanine? Can you take too much rhodiola? And how do you sort of advise that your customers maybe even modulate their consumption of even these like quote unquote naturals and healthy supplementations? Is it something to talk to their doctors about? How do you know how much to actually take?
Yeah. So the short answer is you can take too much of anything. There's a condition, it's called vitaminosis, and it relates to taking too
I've
many
had that.
vitamins. Yeah.
Yeah, I've had that.
And
I'm like, oh, I want this and this, especially when the stuff makes you feel good. And then
yeah.
you kind of.
And it really depends on, the symptoms of vitaminosis really depends on how much of the specific vitamin you're taking and what vitamin it is. But I would say, in the case of GABA, you can take too much, and really what ends up happening is you get drowsy. It makes you sleepy.
Mm. Oh
So,
wow.
yeah, say if you were to eat 20 chews of PYM, it would make you drowsy. Um,
Mhm.
with L-theanine, you can take too much, but you'd have to take a lot of it.
Yeah, I've gotten a headache before from just certain times, maybe not being in this right state and taking
Yeah,
it and just feeling like, oh.
yeah, you can, it can. You'd have to take like 20 times what the recommended dose would be, and yeah.
How much is in a PIM in a
So, I mean, there's a recommended dose, and then there's a chew. So, in a single chew, there's 125 milligrams of GABA, there's 50 milligrams of L-theanine, and there's 25 milligrams of rhodiola. But a
Hmm.
recommended dose is 2 chews, so it'd be 250 milligrams of GABA, 100 milligrams of L-theanine, and 50 milligrams of rhodiola. In terms of rhodiola, it's a bit of an interesting plant. It's it's a type of we the dose in our product, you would need to take a good deal of it to get, say, a a uh let's just
lethal
say,
dose?
no, I don't want to say lethal dose. No. No, to get too much.
Yeah.
y- you know, with rhodiola, what you'd find is if you were to take too much, you can get a rash. It causes
Mm.
kind of a facial rash
Sort of
and
sounds
itchy.
like a rash, right? I think
Yeah.
the full name is like rhodiola rosella or something like that.
Yeah, and so it
Yeah.
can cause some itchiness, and so the thing is that rhodiola is quite expensive, and you need to take quite a lot of it, so it'd be kind of an expensive thing to do to take an enormous amount of it to
Super
get to the.
bitter too. Like
Yeah,
by itself in a powder, it's horrendous. It's not very, so I can imagine the gummy is a nice delivery mechanism
it
also,
is,
that
it
that
is,
it
and
doesn't feel gross.
yeah, and we manage it. Actually it makes our gummy a little darker, the rhodiola,
Oh,
but
cool.
the the flavor is masked as a result of our us adding a sweetener. In the case of our original product, it's allulose.
Mm, so cool. Plants can change your mind and help. Zooming out a bit, I'm curious, when you think about the mental health space in general, like it's popped off as of late. A lot of focus and attention and things being destigmatized, which is awesome. But still a lot of progress and that still needs to be made. What are there any common misconceptions that you see when it comes to treating things like anxiety and stress?
I mean, the biggest common misconception at this point relates to the premise that you can take a single thing and it will totally mitigate all
Okay.
anxiety or all stress or all depression. If your lifestyle is imbalanced, meaning you eat terribly and you're seeking to find that one solution, that silver bullet, if you will, it's unlikely that you're going to find, you know, the panacea in something, So
Mm,
it's really about how do you create balance in your life to manage your well-being. So if you're not getting a fitness regimen in, it puts you at greater risk of still experiencing anxiety, even if you're taking anxiety medication, even if you're taking products like PYM.
mm,
It just from our experience and from our lens, you have to take kind of the whole snapshot of an individual to really understand what it is that they need. And the same applies to
mm.
things like depression, right? Um, if you're a traumatized individual and you're relying upon mood stabilizers to manage that trauma, you're not going to get incredible benefit, for managing the trauma through mood stabilizers. It might make you feel kind of stable, but, and, might reduce the highs and lows of a circumstance or, of a day, but it emotionally blunts you. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what mood stabilizers do in many circumstances. That's how it interacts with your brain, the systems of your brain. So, um, you probably need to, in addition to taking products, do therapy. You know, um, I think in that vein, the idea around psychedelics. I think psychedelics are transformational for the industry, for the mental health industry. I think they're absolutely wonderful, but in the wrong dosage and without the right context, they can be harmful for you. If you're
Yeah.
not going through an integration process and you're taking specific psychedelics and getting into a neuroplastic state, it can actually be more traumatic, right?
Yeah.
So really what it comes down to is understanding the context of the individual and then applying an approach that supports the individual on every different level.
How do you, something I've realized for myself, and I'm curious how you go about it, you being in the mental health space is like sometimes we think we're balanced and then we like really like have to take a hard look in the mirror and just be like, nah, that's not necessarily balanced. Like an example of that, I was recently listening to a podcast on dopamine by Andrew Huber, Doctor. I think he's a doctor, Andrew Huberman, and it was this concept of dopamine stacking. Like oftentimes, like even like using caffeine before we go into the gym, like both of those things are going to boost dopamine. So relying on something like caffeine to get that sort of extra motivation over time can kind of minimize the peak and the dip that we get naturally, and then can kind of like actually disrupt our baseline dopamine.
I,
So that listening to that, for example, like got me to pull back and be like, oh wow, maybe I'm not living as balanced as I think I am, and I sort of need to, yeah. Do you have any
yeah,
thoughts around that?
yeah, I do. I mean, there is the lens of managing your neurotransmitter health through biohacking. Um, I think there there are actualized individuals who are really seeking performance that engage in all sorts of different hacks, if you will. And I think that can be great. Especially if you can measure it, right? If you can measure consistently your neurotransmitter levels, then you can really start understanding what the key drivers are of your optimal health, right?
And
Or
sorry,
your
Zach, can you
neuroendocrine health.
measure that today? Is that something that you can measure in like a test, or is that a self-report?
Yeah, yeah. So you can measure it in a test. I'll go into it in 1 second.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
No, no worries. But I think when it comes to the biohacking things like that, uh, there is there are benefits to be had from it. The challenge is, are there ways to support, balance in your life that don't necessarily relate to focusing 90 minutes a day on your specific neuroendocrine environment, and having to create such a highly curated experience? Meaning, you know is there a way to ensure that you can still have solid outcomes by not engaging in this, specific, you have to take this formulation and then you exercise for X minutes, and like that? I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I think it can be a very good thing, especially if people know their bodies and what works for them. The main thing I would say is that if someone's going out and saying, this is how you manage your mental health, and this is how you manage your dopamine environment, and it's this, and that
Yeah.
likely won't work for everybody, right?
Yeah.
It will
There's not a
work for
one
some
size fits
people,
all.
right? And so dopamine stacking for many people could be awesome. But for people with caffeine sensitivity, or like, there's probably other solutions that would work better. Relative to neurotransmitter testing, what I would say is it can be tested, but there's a lot of variability over the course of a day and a week, etc. So you can get a snapshot of your neurotransmitter environment, but if you're not doing it consistently, you're not going to know what a baseline looks like, right? So the main thing, there are ways to determine if you're feeling deficient because it very much relates to your mood. So there are surveys, diagnostics that you can engage in to develop a deeper understanding of how you feel when you engage in a certain activity. And that's also a reasonably good analog of determining what your neurotransmitter environment looks like, because how you feel very much relates to how balanced you are. So I would say, if you're really looking to develop a deep understanding of your neurotransmitter environment, you do both, right? But you have to do it consistently, and it can be very expensive. Neurotransmitter tests aren't cheap. I think the baseline is like just under $200, right? So if you're doing that all the time, that's generally not affordable for most people. So the main thing is how can you create basically an experience or establish a diagnostic environment that enables a company or a clinician to have a reasonably good approximation of where somebody is, and then you can make recommendations on that. That's kind of historically how the model worked around modern psychiatry, right? Is that, a psychiatrist understands what it is you're experiencing over a few different, sessions, and then can say, okay, based upon this, I'll recommend these different things. That said, you can create basically a tech enablement layer in which someone could take diagnostics and provide kind of a foundation of data that if you're consistently testing around, establishing the diagnostic around, then you can kind of understand what your baseline looks like. What makes that even more valuable is if you understand what that baseline looks like when you do things with, when you engage in fitness, when you're eating certain things, when you're, doing therapy, then you start understanding really what the optimal outcomes are.
Interesting. In this last section, Zach, we have a couple more minutes together. I'd love to get into some of your recommendations, and also sort of, how what you think people can like maybe take away from the conversation. The first is what advice you'd give to yourself, your 18-year-old version of yourself.
The advice I give the 18-year-old version of myself is, take your time to discover the things that you love doing, and quit alcohol. Just stop. It turns out I'm a lot happier not using alcohol, and it was just a part of my life from my teens onward.
Mm,
And when I actually discovered how great life can be without drinking, um, it was kind of a massive aha moment.
mm,
But the thing for me, I thought, oh wow, I'm gonna stop drinking and my social life will come to an end, and I'm just gonna be a homebody, and you know, suddenly I'm not around anyone. My friends won't want to be friends with me. And it turns out it couldn't be further from the truth, right? And so I wish in hindsight that I discovered this a lot earlier than when I actually did discover it.
mm. Yeah, I can definitely relate to that one. I think you also can have a lot more energy going out and stuff, even without that, and consistently having to refuel. Um, what purchase of, let's say, $200 or less have you made maybe in the last 6 to 12 months that has most positively impacted your life? Um,
What purchase of $200 or less is most positively impacted my life? Um, I would say uh, a monthly, and so this is $200 or less on a monthly basis. It's a consistent neurotransmitter health regimen. This
hmm,
is something that's been transformative for me. So in addition to taking PYM on a regular basis, which helps manage my GABA system, I take 5-HTP, I take St. John's wort, I take methylated B vitamins. I have an MTHFR mutation. I
hmm.
would say actually the methylated B vitamins and
That
methylated
stuff is
folate
amazing. Yeah. Do
for
you take
people.
Quicksilver Scientifics?
I don't take Quicksilver. I take Jarrow, but for
Okay.
methylated B vitamins. But the the main thing from my perspective is when I discovered I had an MTHFR mutation and started managing B vitamin synthesis for that, to help with serotonin synthesis, it was like night and day. So I
Wow.
would say that would be if there's one single purchase, it's it's that methylated B vitamins and methylated folates. So that's
Hmm.
two single that's two purchases, but
And then do you take the 5-HTP every day?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah.
I need it. I'm in in without supplementation, I get depressed. And so I found a way to manage depression for me personally through taking 5-HTP.
Hmm. Got it. Um, what do you imagine you'll be doing 10 years from now?
I imagine I'll be doing a similar thing, if not the same thing, but with more scale and more opportunity to help people at scale. I love being a mental health advocate. I love focusing on establishing supportive experiences. I also love helping entrepreneurs. I hope that I'll have the opportunity to continue investing in awesome people doing great things. But yeah, it's really about taking a systems-based approach towards making a difference in the mental health space, and just want to be expanding opportunities to help more people at scale around quality, access, and parity, right? Really what that relates to is how can we create low cost, hyper effective experiences? And so that's really for everybody. Low cost, hyper effective experiences for everyone.
Hmm.
That's what I want to continue focusing around.
That's an awesome mission. And, last but not least, if there's one, key takeaway that you'd like for folks to take away from our discussion, um, what would it be?
I would say if there's one key takeaway, it's go easy on yourself. Find opportunities to love yourself because it's the best investment of your time that you could possibly engage in.
Hmm. I love that. I love that. This has been awesome, Zach. I look forward to meeting you in person. It's been a long time coming, and I look forward to trying PIM. Um, and I appreciate you carving out time to sort of share your journey, your experience, what you're building, as well as your recommendations. And idea, research with our community. So thank you.
Thank you, John. It's such a pleasure, and I look forward to meeting in person.
Likewise. Thanks, Zach.
Thanks.